Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to commend Maybank for organizing this Invest ASEAN event. And I thank you for inviting me to share with you this afternoon my take on the Philippine stock market, challenges and opportunities in a changing future. In my presentation this afternoon on the challenges confronting the Philippine Stock Exchange, or PSE, I will be benchmarking certain metrics against our ASEAN 6 competitors. Benchmarking helps us gain clear insights on how we stack against our regional peers, helps us set our goals, helps us prioritize areas where we need improvement, and helps us track the progress of our goals. Here, as you will see that as of end of April 2022, when measured against the ASEAN 6 stock exchanges, the PSE ranked last in 2 liquidity metrics: average daily value turnover and number of listed companies. Bursa Malaysia, which ranks second to the last in terms of trading volume, has a daily trading volume of $573.14 million, almost 4.4 times more than PSE's daily turnover of $130.61 million. In terms of number of listed companies, PSE's 281 listed companies pales in comparison to 5th placer Singapore Stock Exchange, having just 42% of Singapore's 668 listed companies. Much of PSE's low market liquidity can be attributed to our limited product range compared to our ASEAN neighbors. In this slide, you will see that all the ASEAN stock exchanges, except for PSE and VNX, or the Vietnam Stock Exchange, have the gamut of capital market products that global exchanges trade. PSE and VNX to date still do not have short selling, options trading, and commodities trading. Another factor that could explain why we sorely trail our ASEAN 6 peers is that only 1.4% of the Philippine population is presently participating in the stock market. Even with the online accounts fueling the growth in accounts over the years, they are not enough to make a significant impact on stock market participation. How does PSE plan to confront this liquidity challenge? The present public float requirement of Philippine-listed companies is 10% for most listed companies, except for those that listed starting in November 2017, when the public float requirement for IPOs was increased to 20%. This has caused many foreign investors to look or treat the Philippine market with disfavor or indifference. In fact, there are still a few companies on the PSE index whose public float remains below 20%. The PSE has recently revised its index rules, requiring that companies must now have a minimum public float of 20% if it wishes to qualify for inclusion in the PSE index. This new rule will take effect starting this December 2022 index review period. We also intend to revive the plan we were discussing with the SEC in 2019 to increase the public float of listed companies from the present 10% to 25% over a period of time. Unfortunately, the pandemic struck, so we had to shelve this plan temporarily until the market's able to fully recover from the pandemic. Next. What is the PSE doing to increase the number of listed companies? Next slide, please. The exchange revised its listing rules effective last March 2021. We revisited our rules for listing on the small, medium, and emerging board and relaxed the listing criteria to encourage more privately held businesses to tap the equity market for funding. We also introduced the sponsor model for listing so that companies that have no track record can now list on the SME board. Our new rules also include a temporary relief in consideration of the business impact brought about by COVID-19. Next slide, please. Taking off from the amendments to our listing rules, PSE instituted a listing engagement and assistance program, or what we call LIP, where we conduct one-on-one sessions with companies that have signified their intent to do an initial public offering or IPO. When they are ready, we connect these companies with IPO advisors and professionals who can help them in their preparation for their IPO. We originally had a total of 36 companies enrolled with LIP, 11 of which were looking to list on the main board, while 25 are considering listing on the SME board. I'm happy to report that of these 36 companies, one, namely Rasla Corporation, listed on the main board just last Monday, while two other companies, House Stock and CTS Global Equity Group Inc., listed on the SME board last January and April, leaving 33 companies still working on their IPO journey. Aside from our hand-holding program, we continue to form strategic collaborations with different business groups. Foremost of this is our ongoing talks with the Department of Trade and Industry's Board of Investments, whereby we are discussing with BOI how to require BOI-registered enterprises availing of tax incentives to list their shares in the PSE. We also have a collaboration with DTI Negosyo Center Online, wherein the PSE holds webinars exclusively for DTI business counselors and regular staff to impart to them the basics of IPO listing and how it can help SMEs grow their businesses. We also have a tie-up with the Philippine Franchise Association, where we host listing info sessions for their members. Finally, the PSE also embarked on a campaign for a listing information program with investment houses. We recently had one listing info session with SB Capital Investment Corporation, and we'll have another one again with them next month. A session with PNB Capital and Investment Corporation is also scheduled for the third quarter. Hopefully, through these collaborative efforts, we will be able to add more companies in our handholding program and eventually increase the PSE roster of listed companies. Next slide, please. Apart from attracting more companies to list, we also acknowledge the need for programs that will support newly listed and non-PSE index companies. We want to continuously provide value for these companies and help boost their growth post-IPO. As a pilot project, we opted for an investor relations event that will help increase analyst coverage and attract more institutional and retail investors for the participating companies. The maiden activity for this, which was held a week and a half ago, was the PSE STAR Investor Day. STAR standing for Strengthening Access and Reach of Listed Companies. There were 15 listed companies that took part in this event, and the respective CEOs and CFOs briefed over 830 analysts, investors, and other investment professionals on their first quarter performance and their ongoing and upcoming projects, among others. Aside from providing PLCs a platform to reach a wider audience through our event co-hosts and partners through this Investor Day, we want to encourage more of our PLCs to hold briefings as a standard practice, since only about a fourth of our listed companies regularly communicate to analysts and investors through company presentations. To attract new investors and increase trading activity of existing investors, we are determined to introduce and launch new products and services. To keep up with the continuous changes in market practices and regulatory environment, the PSE regularly reviews its rules in line with their objective of improving market depth. We now have a new rule for preferred shares only listing, which took effect just last May 24, 2022. The rules provide issuers with flexibility on their fundraising structure, while providing the public the opportunity to participate in the economic benefits of these PPPs and infrastructure companies as shareholders. This can be a viable model for capital raising by PPPs and infrastructure companies who are not yet ready to offer common shares to the public because their projects are still at the startup stage and the full earnings potential have not yet been reached. Last March 28, the PSE launched 2 new indices with specific themes in line with our goal of encouraging increased trading of non-index securities and providing alternative indices for investors and index providers when benchmarking our market performance. The PSE Dividend Yield Index highlights the companies that consistently give high-yielding dividends, while the PSE Mid-Cap Index showcases mid-sized companies listed in the exchange. Both indices will have 20 constituents. To qualify for inclusion in the PSE Dividend Yield Index, companies should have regularly issued cash dividends for the past 3 consecutive years. Companies must also be listed for at least 12 months during the review period, and at least 6 months for real estate investment trusts. The free float, liquidity, and financial performance of companies are also evaluated in the construction of this dividend yield index. For inclusion in the PSE Mid-Cap Index, a company must be listed for at least 12 months during the review period and must have a free float of at least 15% of its outstanding shares at the end of the 12-month period. Market capitalization, liquidity, and financial performance are the other criteria considered. PSE index members are excluded from the mid-cap index. The exchange is also undertaking several initiatives geared towards improving a stakeholders' end-to-end digital experience, particularly a data analytics program that will empower investors to learn and analyze data on their own. An eKYC platform which will enable the conduct of KYC processes through an app. The second phase of PSEEC that will integrate an online payment system for the IPO and FOO subscriptions, and the PSE Academy website for an enhanced interface for users as well as improved content. Our subsidiary, Securities Clearing Corporation of the Philippines, will also transition to a new clearing and settlement system that would support multi-asset and multi-currency settlement and incorporate international best practices in risk management and other clearing and settlement services. The new clearing system is expected to be launched in the second half of 2022. The PSE is also looking at opportunities in the digital assets and fintech space, given that BSP and SEC have been preparing for these technologies. Although venturing to the space should be carefully considered and studied, especially now that the pandemic accelerated the digitalization of transactions, not only in payments, but also in the capital markets. PSE is presently developing a roadmap for these initiatives, and we continue to have discussions with several potential partner fintech companies. What is PSE doing to increase the local investor base? In terms of strengthening our investor base, the PSE kicked off 2022 with a 2-day online investment expo conducted for free together with the Securities and Exchange Commission and various partner stakeholders. The expo showcased a wide range of personal finance and investment-related topics to create awareness and equip potential new and existing investors with a good working knowledge on personal finance, legitimate financial instruments, and investment opportunities in the equities market. It was a well-attended event, attracting a diverse audience from students to young professionals, homemakers, and Filipinos based overseas. Aside from attending the weekend activity, several participants rewatched the sessions on demand through the Expo platform. The PSE also conducts continuous market education webinars on pertinent investment topics. We have so far conducted 3 webinars this year on the following topics: investing in dividend stocks, stock market performance in presidential election years, and investing in bear markets. The exchange aims to conduct more webinars in the coming months to provide our stakeholders with key investment insights. The PSE also offers an in-depth 124-hour program that dives into capital markets, fundamental and technical analysis, valuation techniques, portfolio management, business ethics, securities regulation, market dynamics, and real-world applications of financial principles. This certified securities specialist course is designed for investors, stock traders, and other industry practitioners who wish to enhance their understanding of equities investing, as well as professionals seeking a career in finance or the capital markets industry. Finally, we are bringing back the conduct of roadshows in the fourth quarter of 2022. We are also in discussions with a fintech platform to find ways to encourage their millions of users to invest in the stock market. At the same time, we are presently exploring the feasibility of enabling fractional share trading. So while the PSE lags behind its ASEAN 6 competitors, I would like to assure you that we are addressing this situation. I believe there will be exciting times ahead for the Philippine stock market. Thank you very much.
Yes, again, thank you, sir, for that very nice presentation. Probably just to kick off our Q&A portion, you talked a lot about liquidity. It's been challenging. April liquidity, if I'm not mistaken, was less than $100 million a day. It was down 40% a month on month last April.
Okay, yes.
Prior to the elections, which is understandable, a lot of fence sitting among clients. You mentioned a lot of initiatives to try to boost it. But what do you think has the strongest chance in terms of improving our average daily turnover versus our ASEAN neighbors?
Well, Alex, like I mentioned in my presentation, I think the key to improving the trading volume really consists of many parts. One, of course, is addressing the liquidity issues, which you address by really having more listed companies. Also, I think getting more retail investors in the market, because when there are retail investors and the foreign investors see that the market is being supported by retail investors, they have this incentive or attraction to join the market, like the Thailand, the stock exchange of Thailand. So we are really working on the number one, increasing the number of listed companies and increasing the number of retail investors, which I think are very important to improve liquidity.
Thank you, President Monson, for that. Yes. Shifting to another topic. One area that probably market participants are looking at also is the securities initiative or short selling. Can you tell us where are we on that front? Any timelines you want to share?
Well, our short selling initiative has been submitted to the SEC and BIR for final approval as early as November or December 2020. We have been following it up persistently with our regulators to approve. There are just 3 items that are holding up the implementation of the short selling. On the Securities and Exchange Commission side, they need to approve the use of foreign collateral for the foreign investors, and also to approve the registration of PDTC as a securities borrowing and lending unit, which I think is very important for, to get the short selling initiative started. At the BIR level, we are waiting for their approval of the what we call global master security lending agreement. Right now, the BIR has only approved the local MSLA, which is really for bilateral arrangements between brokers. We have been pushing this short selling because I believe with short selling, we are going to be able to keep foreign investors in the market. Because when foreign investors determine or think that they have to exit the emerging markets, or the Philippines in particular, if you are on a long-only market as we are, then they are forced to sell their securities. But if we have the short selling product here, then they're able to keep their investments because they will be able to hedge their portfolio. So, in fact, I think it was last Monday, we had our final meeting of the Capital Market and Development Council, hosted by Finance Secretary Dominguez. And he also raised that question: what's keeping the short selling program from being implemented? And I think that will create enough pressure for our regulators to, to move faster on this.
Okay, thank you, President Ponson. I think Jackie has also a question.
Thank you so much for that one. Would you be able to, I guess, peg a timeline on maybe when we can expect short selling to be allowed?
I sound like a broken record. I keep, projecting the next quarter, but I've learned my lesson, I can't control how fast or, how quick our regulators move. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that with that pressure from Secretary Dominguez last Monday, hopefully by the next quarter, we'll have the short selling product, in place.
So it's definitely priority then.
I think so.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So speaking of, flow inducing initiatives from the PSE, I was just wondering, what do you think of, we're interested on your thoughts on the REITs market. So I think that was very successful. Do you see more inflows on the REITs, and are there any more listings on that end?
Yes, well, as you know, the REIT law was passed sometime in 2010. And for the next 10 years, there was not a single listing of REITs because of the onerous regulations from both the SEC and the BIR. This was subsequently addressed by Secretary Dominguez at the beginning of 2020. Okay, and that's why in the middle of the pandemic, we were able to have our first listing of REITs, which was the Ayala REIT. And it turned out to be very, very successful. So far, we've had, I think, 4 or 5 additional REIT listings. They have raised over 300 billion pesos in capital. So it's a very, very potent market. It will really help, property developers to expand, their property development. Do I look forward to more REIT listings? I do. But again, I am trying to work on the amendment of the REIT law. Because under our present REIT law, the only companies that could undertake a REIT listing are those that have rental income. Okay, so for example, in the last REIT listing of Citycore Energy, their assets really are solar plants. Okay, and that is what they wanted to offer in the REIT, the revenues from the solar plants. But this was disapproved by the SEC. So they had to restructure their whole company so that they could create a rental income, which became the basis for the REITs. So we will have more REIT listing. I mean, We have not had the listing from the biggest property development company, SM, although we have been talking to them and they have some plans to do it this year. But really, I think we need to further amend our REIT law so we can encourage like toll road companies, logistics, hospitals, to list as a REIT.
So is it safe to say that, sir, in your wish list of the amendments on the REIT law, you want to expand the income structure to more than just the rental income?
Correct. Again, basically benchmarking it with our regional peers. The REITs in the other regions allow for this kind of REIT offerings. Only we don't, do it. So, like I said, we continuously benchmark to improve our markets.
That's very exciting to hear.
Yes.
And then I guess shifting a little bit, you mentioned a while ago that there were 2 new indices that you introduced this year. Is there any more indices that you're looking to introduce? And I guess the more popular one is a sustainability or an ESG index. Is
Correct.
that in the pipeline as well?
We had plans to really launch through 3 new indices, which is the high dividend yield, the mid cap, and an ESG index. But as far as the ESG index is concerned, we have a group we call the ASEAN exchanges. So we recently formed a committee that will standardize the sustainability reporting and measurement for listed companies. Only then I think can we be able to, develop an index for ESG companies.
If I recall properly, I think the formalization of that will be ending this year. I think it was 3
Yes.
years.
The
from
committee is supposed to report to the ASEAN Exchange CEO in November.
Okay, so I guess after that we'll have
Yes.
more movement. That's very good news. And then I guess before I turn over the floor back to Alex, maybe so this came from the floor. Maybe can we get your views on removing the 30 name limit on the PSCI index and maybe increasing the 30 name limit, increasing the number of constituents?
Well, as it is with 30 members, we have a few of the, index companies that have a very low public float. So I think we want to address this public float issue first before we consider increasing the number of constituents in the index.
Right, President, was a very sensible.
Yeah.
For next question, going back on how to programs to improve retail investor participation in the Philippines. Like in this call, we're live in 6 ASEAN locations right now. A lot of OFWs out there. How do you define, let's say, a Philippine retail investor? And are there programs to try to tap the OFW market to invest back into the motherland?
Okay. Well, I don't know if you're familiar. I think you're familiar with our program, PSE-EC. That's the electronic allocation system for IPOs. As you know, when a company launches or wants to do an IPO, 10% of their shares must be offered to the local small investor. Before, when I took over as PSE president, this local small investor program was limited to 25,000 pesos per investor. And to be able to invest in an IPO, this investor would have to go to a kiosk, one of 3 locations in Manila, Makati, and Quezon City. Go there, get an application form for the IPO, show their government-issued IDs, fill up the application form, and bring this application form to their brokers for the brokers to sign off on it that they have an account with the brokers. And then they bring it back to the kiosk and make a payment, all for 25,000 pesos of investment. So, it's not surprising that even though 10% of IPO shares are allocated to small investors, we were hitting below 1%. the take-up for IPOs by local small investors is only 1%. So one of the first things I did when I took over, I said, we have to do something about this local small investor program. So we digitalize the allocation process, which is what we call the PSEC. Took 2 years to develop the platform. But now all one has to do is register at ec.pse.com.ph, indicate who their trading participant is, and then they're registered. And then every IPO, they are going to be notified and they will be able to subscribe online. Okay. Since the program started in 2019, the take-up of IPOs by local small investors have reached about more than 8% on the average. But in fact, a lot of the IPOs have, oversubscription in the LSI. So back to Alex's question, what do we do for OFWs? The OFWs are a big participants now in IPOs. So when we have an IPO, we always say, oh, there are investors from 58 provinces and about 30 countries or 15 territories. So now it's more democratized.
All right, that's good to know, President Monson. Jackie has a follow-up question.
So, okay, speaking of, I guess, retail investors, which I'm really happy to find out that there's a lot of initiatives geared towards improving that. What are your views on cryptocurrency? I'm sure you get this all the time. There's a
Yes.
lot of retail investors.
Well, cryptocurrency, I don't know if you know about, we have about 1.7 million stock market investors. But I think I heard more than 4 million small investors that have, crypto, that trading crypto. So, so it's my view that unfortunately, as of today, there are no regulations governing crypto trading or crypto exchanges. But I anticipate, in the next 3 to 5 years, crypto trading will be part of the exchange. And that's why we've really, at the PSE, we have formed a task force to study this, and plan a road and, design a roadmap. And we have been discussing, with a lot of fintech companies in Singapore on how we can work together. So we're open to it. But, like I said, we don't want to be the first mover. There are no stock exchanges yet in the region that allow crypto trading in their exchanges, at least for the retail market.
Thank you, President Monson. I have a question from the audience. Different topic. What is your timeline for fractional shares capability? What needs to happen to make this a possibility?
Okay. I mentioned this fractional share project. It's something we're recently looking into. Okay. I think I also mentioned one of our initiatives to increase retail participation in the market is to tie up with a payment platform, a fintech platform that has many users or subscribers, or I don't know how you call them. Okay. Top of mind, of course, is GCash, PayMaya.
Maya.
So these people have, I think GCash has 55 million users.
Yes.
And I think PayMaya is about 42, 43. So we're working with these payment platforms to find a way how we can encourage their users to trade in the stock exchange. Because of this initiative, I said, we have shares, for example, like PLDT, Globe, that are in the thousands, 2,000 plus one. We will not be able to tap the retail investor if, they will be forced to buy, a board for the shares. So we are looking into how we can do fractional trading. We're trying to see do we do this through our trading engine, or do we come up with a, like a market maker concept? So this is what we're studying because we want to push this for the retail investors.
Sounds exciting if it's
Like I said, exciting times ahead for PSE.
right.
I'm
All,
busy.
yeah,
Super
all
busy.
about growth. I have a question with regards to the ASEAN exchanges. There's been some talk in the past that there's a possibility that, say, you can trade the ASEAN markets, let's say, out of the Philippines if you want to. Where are we in that initiative, sir? And any timeline that we're looking at?
Uh, this ASEAN initiative of, I guess, one common trading for the whole ASEAN market. This has been in discussion for the last, I think, 10 years. And it's very difficult because, you have different priorities for each exchange. You have different regulations for each country. So my personal take on this, that is not going to happen. Okay. So what we're doing, for example, PSE, we are doing bilateral talks. For example, with Singapore Exchange, we are doing bilateral talks with Shenzhen Stock Exchange to establish what we would call, let's say, a PSE SGX Connect, whereby the brokers in the Philippines can buy Singapore stocks and vice versa. The same thing for the PSE Shenzhen Stock Connect. So that's something that should be coming up in the next year or two.
Right.
But having said that, sir, do you think that's going to be more net positive or more negative, let's say, for Philippine stocks if they're able
Well,
to?
I think, for example, we have a PSE Shenzhen Connect. Okay. Of course, I will not say this in front of my, Chinese colleagues, but it might be difficult to expect local investors to invest in, in the China stocks.
Mhm.
But the China market, the retail market in China is very big. They invest in everything, so that's what we want to tap for these Chinese investors to invest in the Philippine market. So it's supposed to be a two-way thing, but I think it might be more of a one-way thing in our favor, of course.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense, sir. Okay, well, to wrap this session up, maybe we can ask a question from our audience. Questions, anyone? For President Monzon?
I think we have one from Sebi.
Okay, we have one. Please go ahead.
Hi, President Monson. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask for your thoughts on the fourth tax reform package on capital income taxation. I know there's a different list or proposal that was given by the outgoing Department of Finance, but there were some elements there on transaction level taxes for the capital markets that I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, on how it might affect the equities market and the PSE moving forward.
One of the downsides of trading in the Philippine market is what we call the friction cost. Okay, if you look at our ASEAN neighbors, the friction cost for investors to trade is very low. In the Philippines, automatically you have 60 basis points or 0.6 of 1% stock transaction tax. In short, whether you gain or lose on the trade, you have to pay 0.6%. Okay. One of the components of the train law, the Tax Reform Act, is what we call the PIFITA law. Unfortunately, this PIFITA law was not passed in the last Congress. It has been approved by Congress, but it got stuck in the Senate. What does the PIFITA do? The PIFITA, number one, hopes to make uniform the withholding tax on dividends and on time deposits or money market placements. Money market placements used to have a 20% final withholding tax, while dividends to individuals had a 10% final tax. This was going to be raised to 15% uniform for both. But the more exciting part about that PIFITA is there was a program there to reduce the stock transaction tax by 10 basis points every year until it gets finally to 10 basis points and it stays there. That would be good, very good for the market. Except, you know, if you remember for the CREATE law, the original intention of the CREATE law was to reduce the corporate income tax by 5% at 1% a year. But for one reason or another, and it's good for the, you know, good for the country, they did a one-time reduction from 30 to 25. So I'm hoping if this PIFITA bill is refiled, it has to be refiled because it was not acted on by the last Congress. If it is refiled, maybe they can see their way through, you know, bring it down to 10 basis points in one go. Okay. But like I tell my colleagues, no, we are going to propose this. It's going to result in revenue loss. We have to propose, you know, what substitute revenue measures can the government make out of this? But in answer to your question, we are, you know, that PIFITA thing is very good for the capital markets. We're going to be pushing for the refiling of that bill. And hopefully, like I said, to reduce the stock transaction tax from 60 basis points to 10 basis points in one go.